guys, Diana here from Garden Love. Today I want to make a video that has been requested from so many people, and the reason why I haven't done it is because there's not one answer to this question, and the question is how to water your fruit trees. How often to water your fruit trees? Well, that's a tough question because it's going to depend on a lot of things. One, what kind of climate you're in. Two, where is your fruit tree? Is it in direct sun, shade half the day, or shade most of the day? What climate are you in? Are you in the winter, summer, spring? What state are you in? What country are you in? How is the weather there? Is it very humid? Is it very dry? Is it very windy? All those things take effect on your tree. It might be hot but windy. It might be cold but windy, and you think that, your soil is not going to dry out. Well, the wind does dry out your soil, so it might be windy, it might need more water. You're going to have to check. The biggest teacher or lesson you can give yourself is actually going out to check your fruit trees. Quite frankly, here in Southern California, it gets so hot, and as you can hear, there's some wind going on right now. So my containers tend to get dry super fast. So my trees won't mind if I water every single day during the warm season, because the soil does dry out. Now, another thing that I try to do to try to preserve some water inside my containers, I try to put mulch. Mulch is the biggest thing that I would recommend for you guys to get on your fruit trees if they're growing in container and if they're growing in the ground. Mulch is just so vital because it has so many benefits. For one, it helps preserve the moisture in the soil, especially on the top layer, because the top layer is where those feeder roots like to have a little bit of moisture, so they can feed off the soil that's around them. And when there's moisture, there's contact between the soil and the root. When they're dry out, those roots aren't touching the soil, so therefore they're going to dry out as well. So that's why mulch is so important, because it helps keeps the moisture on that top layer where the feeder roots are, the tiny little roots. Okay, I know this is off topic, but when you do plant your fruit trees, you want those tiny little roots to be right below the first layer of your soil. You don't want them to be too you don't want to bury them. Okay, so now back to watering. So when the winter, it's cold and sometimes it's not windy, so excuse me, you don't want to overwater your containers, because in the winter your trees are asleep pretty much. They kind of go dormant, even if it's a citrus, they kind of stop growing for a minute. So for that reason, you don't want to overwater them. You don't want them to be waterlogged. You don't want them to get root rot. So during those times, they're going to require a lot less water, maybe once a week, maybe once every other week. But when I mean watering, I mean like deep watering. Let the water it once till it gets to the top, let it drain out, and then water it again. Okay, let it drain out again. That's deep watering. That's going to ensure that all your roots and all the soil in there is going to have good moisture, and it's going to stay like that for a couple of days. Okay, in the winter, like I said, wait a week or two, but most importantly, go out there, remove the mulch, check to see how the top layer is doing. It might be 2 weeks and it's still moist because it's cold and there's not a lot growing, not a lot happening in the trees, so the moisture staying in there. Okay, now during the winter, if you're seeing that you water a week ago and there's still moisture, you're seeing that you water 2 weeks ago and there's still moisture, you water 3 weeks ago, okay, now you're gonna have to be careful. You're gonna have to remove the mulch, let it get some air, let it air dry a little bit, because you don't want your trees to get root rot. I've never had this problem, but I'm putting it out there for people who might live in climates where maybe your trees the water might not drain as well, and it might not be the sun might not be out as much, like here in Southern California. Here in Southern California, even if it's winter, the sun's out at some point of the day where it gets pretty warm enough for the trees to actually continue to drink from its container. Okay, now that I'm bringing that point out, when you do plant your trees, you want to make sure that you have good drainage. So make sure that you put plenty of holes in your container. Keep in mind that You can always water more, but once you have a waterlogged container, it's going to be hard to drain out. Okay, plus you don't want to tilt that container and start drilling holes in there with, you know, potential of stressing your tree, which you don't want to do. So before you even plant your tree, make sure that you have well draining holes in your container. Okay, those are basically the tips that I want to give you guys when it comes to watering. It's just gonna depend on your location, weather, climate, microclimate. I mean, some trees here, like this one, is under a little shade. It doesn't require as much water because it doesn't drink as much water as perhaps maybe my Mexican key lime that's right there. You might not be able to see it here. Let me move you over. My Mexican key lime, it gets a lot more sun than my other trees, and it might require more water. Actually, as a matter of fact, when I go check the soil on both my key limes, it tends to be more dry than this tree. All of those things play effect on your container, your trees. One more thing I want to add, I mean, I can go on and on and on. I just want to give you guys different examples and different ways to think about this, so that way when you're looking at your tree and wondering how often I should water it, you're doing a process of elimination based on all the things that I mentioned here. Okay, what kind of container you use also has a big role on how much water your tree is going to need. Most of my containers are actually plastic, some sort of plastic. This one might look like a terracotta container, but it's not. It's actually like some sort of plastic, so that helps retain moisture in there, which is a good thing because I don't have to water as often. Here in Southern California, if I didn't use those and I used terracotta pots, I would have to water every single day, maybe twice a day. So keep that in mind. If you live in a climate that doesn't get as hot as Southern California, terracotta pots might be the best thing for you to get, because it's gonna allow everything to dry out in a good time instead of it being waterlogged. Okay, these containers help me retain some moisture in the soil, so I have to water less when it gets super hot. But keep in mind, even here in Southern California, there is weeks when we have heat waves that I have to water every day, because just remember, we are the only resource. I say this in almost all my videos. When you're growing fruit trees or anything in containers, you, the gardener, the mama plant, you are the only resource to these plants. Okay, only you can provide it with fertilizer, watering, put it in the right microclimate and move it when you need to, or you know. Now there's going to be a complete different video on how to fertilize your fruit trees in containers, because fertilizing your fruit trees in containers is completely different than fertilizing a fruit tree in the ground, as I have here my apple tree. This is a huge apple tree. If you guys haven't heard the story about this tree, it was given to me from a Facebook group that someone that didn't want it in their yard anymore for some reason. They asked somebody to come and dig it up. I did. I went to dig it up. I took it out and put it right here. I'll tell you guys in a different video a story about this. I haven't said the story in a while. I shared this story when I first started my channel, but there's so many of you guys that are new to my channel. You guys probably haven't heard the story, so we'll talk about it another time. But this tree was free, came this mature, and it's grown tremendously, and it has tons of apples and fruits ready to go. I just saw a huge lizard run. All right guys, it's very important to me that I answer all the questions about watering, and I remember something that happened with this pineapple waba. It's pretty much root bound, I would say. Okay, one, I feel like it needs a new container, so that's another reason why you might have to water more often than you would from a container a plant that just got potted into a new container, because the roots are filling up the whole container. It has very little soil, which means that it's going to retain a lot less moisture. So keep that in mind. If you have a tree that's been in a container for a long time, you might have to up pot it, root prune it, pull it out, and kind of loosen up the soil, put new soil in there so there's more soil in there with the roots, or have to water it even more often. Okay, now the second thing I want to tell you guys when it came to this is, Sometimes, I don't know if you notice that you water your plant, you're like watering, it's completely filled to the top, it drains completely, you go and lift the mulch, and the mulch, right under the mulch, the soil is completely dry, and you're like, what just happened? I just watered my plant completely and it's still not water. Well, sometimes over winter the soil gets really hot and it kind of like creates this kind of blanket, and no water is getting into the soil. So what you need to do is water, and as you're watering, you need to go and kind of scratch the soil so they can get mixed. And once you do that and kind of like dig your fingers inside the soil, you're gonna create kind of like some more ways for water to get to the root ball, and then you will solve that issue. Usually I only have to do that once every spring because it happens during the winter, and once I do that, after that, usually my plants are completely fine and you can water them just fine. Just keep that in mind, because a lot of people say I'm watering and it's just not working out. I discovered this myself because I was checking on this tree. I lifted the mulch to see how root bound it was, and I was like, I just watered this and it was completely dry. It didn't make any sense to me. So I water again. I mixed up the soil, allowed the soil to get absorbed, allowed the water to get absorbed by the soil, mixed it in like a little sopita, like a little soup, and it worked out just fine. All right, so keep that in mind. Size of the container versus the tree really does matter, because this tree is somewhat a mature tree, tons of fruit on this. It's amazing. I'm super happy with this tree. I'm so proud of it. But the container that it's in is maybe should be a bigger container for this fruit tree, but it's not, and it's completely fine. It'll still keep producing as long as you're feeding it and you're watering it often. This tree, I have to come and water every single day, especially because it has fruit, it has tons of foliage, and the container is not as big, so it's not going to retain as much water as this tree needs. So that's very important, guys. You have to look at your tree compared to the container. How many, you have to try to imagine how many roots are in that container. If there's more roots than actual soil, you gotta water it every single day in the growing season, especially when it's flowering. If you don't want your flowers to drop, you have to water your fruit tree every day, so that way those flowers can stay there. Because if the tree is thirsty and it's just not being treated right, it's gonna drop its flowers, because it's gonna try to preserve its foliage, because they get you know, sunlight from their foliage. So it's gonna drop its flowers and eventually drop its leaves, and eventually it's gonna be sick if you don't water it properly. Okay, so remember, if it's in a container, you have to make sure that you water it properly. You have to look at the tree size compared to the container, and try to imagine how many roots you think they're in there. If there's tons of roots, you want to water it every day when it's flowering and when it's producing fruit, because you want that fruit to stay on these branches. I'll show you guys how amazing this tree looks. Actually, from this view, it is quite beautiful, because all I see is fruit. Alright guys, one last thing that I'm going to add to this video when it comes to watering. There's a huge difference between growing in a container or growing in the ground. You guys know that last year I put this amazing satsuma tree that I trained to start growing aspalair to cover this fence. It's in the ground. I don't worry about this tree at all. You know why? Because when I water this container right here next to me, I'll show you guys, I know that the water is draining, and in exchange is watering this amazing satsuma tree. Trees that are in the ground have a lot more resource to nutrients and water than trees in containers. Okay, so you're gonna water your trees in the ground a lot less when they're in the ground, with one exception. When you first put in the ground, I water it the first week once a day. After the first week, I water it maybe once a week, and then after that every other week, keeping in mind the weather. If it's really hot, then yeah, I'm gonna continue to water very often. But if it's not, I don't worry about my fruit trees in the ground. I hope that I covered everything in this video, because watering could be a little tricky, but all it takes is a little bit of intuition, a little bit of process of elimination, and just go out there and check on your trees. All right guys, I hope this video wasn't long. I hope that this video was helpful. because I really want to answer all the questions that you guys put on my videos in the comments, and I get a lot of questions about watering, and I don't know how to answer that sometimes because I don't know where you live, what kind of climate you're in, what season of the year you're in. So I wanted to make this video for you guys. I love you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I can talk about it forever. Here's a houseplant that got waterlogged, and I can tell you guys, let me show you guys. I kept watering this plant for a while, and I started working nights. So since I started working nights, I had to figure out a way to shade out my windows because I get a lot of light in my room in the mornings. So I went ahead and put some covers in my windows so there was a lot less light in my room, which means that my plant was drinking a lot less than it normally used to because it used to get more sun. Remember, when it's warm, when it's hot, and when it's sunny, your plants are going to grow and drink a lot more. This plant started to get waterlogged because there wasn't a lot of sun in my room, and it started to get root rot. So there's nothing I can do about getting the moisture out of the water. It's in there now. I just have to wait for nature to do its process, which is hopefully it can dry out pretty soon, and hopefully the plant can start drinking some of the water so we can get some of the water out of the soil. Okay, so what I did is I brought it outside. I wanted the sun to help me get some moisture out of the soil and also allow this plant to get some light. That way it can start drinking up the water. It's just like us. Whenever we get really thirsty, whenever we're out in the heat riding a bike, we get really thirsty, so we're gonna want to drink some water. If we're inside the house sitting in the couch watching TV, you're not gonna get as thirsty because you're not exerting yourself. Plants are just like us. You got to think about it that way. So think about it. If it's hot outside, it's been hot for a few days, your plants are going to need some more water. Let me show you guys. I don't know if you guys can see. Maybe I'll bring the camera to. Alright guys, I know this is a house plants, but the watering applies to any plants, both outdoor and indoor. This plant is getting root rot, and you can tell by this, by the bottom part, how it's getting kind of see-through. Look at this one. This one is completely root rot. You see that? So I am pretty sad that this happened to my plant, and that was my fault for not realizing that I was shutting daylight from this amazing plant, and it wasn't drinking up, the moisture wasn't coming out. So this is a perfect example, guys. I really hope that this video was informative, that you guys enjoyed it, and that it was helpful. If it was, please give me some thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, share these videos with your family and friends, and I hope that you guys have a blessed day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.